Start. Good morning, everybody. Can we please try to find our seats? We're going to start the program. No, you sit. You guys want to come in out there?
We have some seats.
Guys, want to come closer?
Everybody.
I showered, guys. We're ready, right?
You're ready, yeah. Anthony, you were born ready.
You got it, sir. Good morning. We just want to start out this program by saying thank you for coming and welcome to the Township of North Bergen and the County of Hudson. My name is Anthony Vanieri. I'm your freeholder chairman that represents the town of North Bergen and Sea Caucus, and it couldn't be a greater day in this community than cutting this ribbon and going over with our cars. A long-awaited journey that we waited for a long time. I want to thank Governor Murphy for his support. Mayor Sacco will get into that. First, I want to give a shout-out to our North Bergen Police Chief, Robert Dowd, and the police department, the state police for organizing this, Jonathan, and everybody that came together. John Shore, our DPW superintendent, and the DPW workers all volunteered their time this week to come together and put this together. I want to thank the county for bringing the tents. Thank God we didn't need it. Real fast, I want to introduce the North Bergen elected officials here today. We start with our senior member, the Commissioner, Frank Gargiulo. After him, Commissioner Hugo Cabrera, Commissioner Alan Pascal, and Commissioner Julio Marenco. We also have with us our Hudson County Sheriff, Frank Scileri. I think he's at the shooting range. He's at the shooting range, I think. Where is he? There he is, right there, okay. He's got more guns on you than the state police. Our Fire Director, Mike DiOrio. Our Township Administrator, Chris Penis, who worked very hard on this for all these years. Dominic Petrillo, who started in 1998, meeting with the governor's office back then when we started with the 3 overpasses. I won't be too long now. I'm going to stop. I want to introduce you to the man, our mayor, our state senator, who fought very hard for these 3 overpasses. This one coming about 15 years later, but the mayor will get into that. I want to introduce you to the Honorable Nicholas J. Sacco, Senator, North Bergen.
In 1994, I negotiated 3 overpasses with Governor Whitman, and thought it would happen quickly. And in the beginning, it did. The first 2, Sea Caucus Road and Patterson Plank Road, were built by 2003. And then the great stall became. When we cut those ribbons, I want to just acknowledge my brother Joe Sacco was the engineer on the job, and Pat O'Connor was overseeing it for the DOT. So I thank both of them for being here today. It became amazing. What happened is that John Corzine had the ribbon cut and the groundbreaking in 2008, and this was to be completed by 2011. And we were patient. But every imaginable excuse that could be given for not completing a job is what happened from that point on. From no funding to funding, not knowing how the overpass would be built, not having experience in building an overpass, we went from one excuse to another. 2011 came, and the Bridge to Nowhere was just beginning to be here. The nickname Bridge to Nowhere, very fitting. It was a bridge. Couldn't go near it, had to go around it, and had to go around it through railroad traffic. It was absolutely a virtual nightmare. Working with us at the time was John Boogerswell. John, thank you. You worked with me every step of the way through the frustration. He would come back with a report. It'll be done in 2 years. And then in 2 years, it'll be done in 3 years. And it went on and on. Then the real change took place. Governor Murphy took office. Commissioner Scarchetti actually drove up here with me last November to take a look at the site and was shocked to see how little work was done in all these years. And she promised through the governor that something positive would happen before the year was out. And that's what happened. The work came on, and I have to thank certain people. First, C.J. Hess, the company that put this together, who did a phenomenal job. I thank you for what you've done. Director Corbett, also, new director, new leadership, and the overpass moved forward. And today we're here getting ready to cut it. So I thank the governor, his staff, all of you who are here today, all of you who were involved in this, and I now introduce you to the man who did this for North Bergen and for Secaucus and who opened up West Side Avenue to business, our governor, Phil Murphy.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you so much. Having read all about this, having heard about this, in fact, the very first meeting you and I had, Mayor, was, well, this came up. I feel like we should be quoting General Pershing when he landed in World War I, saying, "Lafayette, we are here." It certainly took long enough. Good morning, everybody. What a treat. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mayor, not just for your introduction and your welcome, as always, a warm welcome to North Bergen, but for your unwavering support and friendship of me personally and of our administration. It means more than you know. It is an honor to be here as well with our Department of Transportation Commissioner Diane Gutierrez-Scacchetti. Honor, Diane. New Jersey Transit Executive Director Kevin Corbett. The Chairman of the Board, Anthony Veneri. Anthony, thank you to you and your team, to the commissioners, and to all the distinguished guests who are here today. It is an honor. So 10 years, and I don't have the long 1994 history, but I've got it back to the 2008 vintage. 10 years, 3 months, and 38 days is how we counted it. Not that anyone has been counting. Mayor Sacco joined with officials from NJ Transit to break ground on a new 69th Street bridge to provide vehicle traffic, a new way to get through North Bergen and eliminate a major traffic choke point. It was, as the mayor said, anticipated to be completed 3 years later in 2011. A press release put out on the day ground was broken touted that this project would pay immediate benefits for the community. A little poetic license with the word immediate, apparently. So much for good intentions. Across inexcusable delays that stretched for over 7 years, entire seasons have gone by with no work being done to bring this bridge to completion. The only action residents and local leaders, and I don't have to tell you all this because you lived it, the only action you saw was an endless game of finger pointing, as the mayor referred to it as the bridge to nowhere sat unfinished. Meanwhile, again, I don't have to tell you this, traffic in North Bergen would continue to come to a standstill whenever a freight train passed through this area. Businesses suffered and drivers fumed as safety was allowed to languish. Our team made finishing this bridge a priority. And in just 1 year, I am so proud that we were able to cut through the excuses and finger pointing and red tape, and this project got done. This bridge was, frankly, in many ways, emblematic of the state of New Jersey's infrastructure when we took office a little bit more than a year ago. Under the prior administration, necessary improvements were left to languish, and communities and commuters were left stranded and less safe. Right now, when it comes to infrastructure, it's up to us to lead. On Tuesday night, in his entire 82-minute State of the Union address, President Trump spent a scant 70 seconds on infrastructure, not even 1.5% of the time he was up speaking. For those of you counting, 71 words out of a total of 5,200. Working infrastructure is vital to our state, our communities, and our future, and it must be central, and it is central to our thinking. As emblematic as the 69th Street Bridge was to the prior administration's priorities, today is equally emblematic of our new mindset, a commitment to tackling long-standing problems and getting things right again for our commuters and our communities. And this is how we're going to get our state back to where it should be. One project at a time, not overnight, but with a commitment to cleaning up the messes of the past so our commuters can envision a smoother and safer road ahead. In addition to the dignitaries, beginning with the mayor and the commissioners and the freeholder chairman and so many others here, I want to echo Anthony's shout out to law enforcement, both locally, county, and state. You all do an extraordinary job. The men and women who built this bridge, God bless you, and thank you for everything you did and the muscle you put in to getting this over the goal line. It is now my honor to introduce the executive director of NJ Transit and a guy with a big role in getting this done, Kevin Corbett. Kevin?
I'm a great believer that actions speak louder than words, so I'll keep the words brief. Certainly, we have a fiduciary responsibility, and we want to spend that money wisely and promptly and get the best value for our construction projects, whether it be positive train control or this bridge. And it takes, sometimes you have to make some tough decisions. We made those tough decisions and promised the mayor we would get this done, and we've done that, and that's the way we're going to be operating going forward. I'd just like to give a couple of shout outs, as the governor alluded. Certainly our team at New Jersey Transit, our capital construction group, who worked with both the engineers, STV and Hess as the contractors. They did a proper job the way they should. But I really appreciate that team effort, and certainly as part of team effort, if people haven't noticed, Diane and I are usually joined at the hip, and the excellent cooperation we have between New Jersey Transit and NJDOT. This is emblematic of the way we operate and want to deliver for the governor and the people of New Jersey. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my boss, Diane.
I'm going to intercede. Thank you. Thank you, Kevin, and again to the NJ Transit crowd, to the DOT crowd who helped get this done. Hats off to you, to each and every one of you. I spoke to Diane last night, confirmed against my judgment that she was going to be here today, because let's all keep Diane and her late mom, Chetta Gutierrez, who passed last evening at the age of 89, an extraordinary woman by all accounts. She was, I believe, an honorary, at least co-chair of my fan club.
Yeah, no, but she's the founder.
And she was an extraordinary woman, again, almost to her 90th birthday, but we lost her last night. I begged Diane not to come, and Diane said that not only did she want to come, but her mom would want her to come. So with that, please welcome and please keep in your prayers our Commissioner of the Department of Transportation, Diane Gutierrez Scacchetti.
So the governor's right. She would have said, if you didn't show up, because I wouldn't see on TV, you're going to be in trouble. So she's watching all of us, I have no doubt. But, a project like this is hard to comprehend. And it was a day not much colder than this one that Mayor Sacco, at an entirely different event, said, please, please, Commissioner, could you just take a ride with me? Could you please come and see this bridge to nowhere? And we said, sure. And we came out and we looked at it, and it was snowy, and it was hard to fathom that there could be a project in New Jersey that could be 2,200 days late. And with that, and with a commitment to the mayor, who was relentless for his constituents, that this bridge had to be open, we undertook a process with a team to get it done. On his part, it was true leadership, but it was the governor's leadership in empowering his team to make certain that we took all necessary steps. And that empowerment is huge in government. And it was the partnership between our folks at DOT, this is surface transportation, and New Jersey Transit, who's got responsibility for what runs under here, to make certain that we worked together to just deliver on what the North Bergen residents expected and what the North Bergen residents deserved, which was an easy commute to where they work and they live and they play. And so for us, we are honored to be here today. Mayor, we made a promise. I am so happy. He said, could you please make sure it's done by March? So here it is, February. We're so happy that we're able to do this. Governor, your leadership, Mayor, your leadership and empowerment of the team to make sure this happened is really what got us here today. So thank you to both of you. Thank you for letting us chalk up a success. It's going to be one of many as New Jersey Transit goes through a truly transformative year in 2019. We thank you for your constant support of us and our organizations. Thanks.
Thank you, man. Yeah. And amen. And it's important to note that not only is Diane the DOT commissioner, but she's also the chairwoman of the board of NJ Transit. We're going to take a couple of quick, if there's any on-topic questions, we're going to break, cut the ribbon, and then in a few minutes after that, I'm going to reconvene with members of the press if you'd like to cover some other topics, if that's okay. Anybody on topic?
Sure. So you said that if you look at this project as one among many that stalled during the Christie administration, can you talk about if you're doing a whole of the state holistic approach to looking at which infrastructure projects had stalled and how you prioritize?
Yeah, so I'll defer I'll ask Diane to come up and talk about that. I spend probably in Diane's domain, and Kevin knows this, I spend a disproportionate amount of my time on the NJ Transit rail piece in specific. And we're digging out of, as you've heard me say many times, thin engineering ranks, late on safety systems, which we've now thankfully caught up on. We have the right management. The prior administration had gutted the funding. We've now got funding. But I'll ask Diane to come up in the broader transportation infrastructure palette in terms of how we prioritize.
So we have a capital plan. We run that capital plan every year. So what we hear, and the best way for us to understand where we're late is we hear from many local officials, residents, and sadly, that is probably the best way we find out about projects like this that are so stalled. Most of the projects at DOT run on a very strict calendar, as is transit. Transit, unfortunately, has the burden of not being able to fund capital on a very. I can't complain. I cannot complain. Please go through. But we examine projects all the time. We're constantly. Thank you, Mom.
This is on cue. Yeah.
We did not organize this train to come through right
Yeah.
now.
Sure we did. Yeah, exactly.
We have good relations with CSX, but not that good.
That's great.
But we work and we look at our capital program all the time to look at projects that are delayed. But in this case, a lot of times it's a local official really raising their hand and saying, look, please come out and look at this. And our commitment is when we're asked, we go. And so we'll continue to look at our capital plan. We'll continue to manage our projects, both sides of the house. We continue to support New Jersey Transit with trust fund dollars. And we're going to deliver on the governor's promise to repair the infrastructure of the state of New Jersey.
Amen. I would just add to that, we have a similar process with the Port Authority, but the biggest gaping need is the federal government. We desperately need the federal government's support, financially and otherwise, to pursue the Gateway Tunnel project, including the Portal Bridge, the tunnel itself, and all that goes with that. I remain hopeful that we will get there. It's frustrating that it's taken so long because it's so obvious 20% of the economy in the entire United States depends on the Northeast Corridor rail lines. Anything else on topic, Ryan? I think it's only poetic that I can't hear you because a train is going by, that otherwise we'll be stuck in our cars.
So you get about $2 billion a year for the Transportation Trust Fund, and I think about 6 or 7 years left. Is that enough to do what this state needs? Because I've heard from transportation advocates, even after this deal with the TTF in place was done, that wasn't enough.
Yeah, so the answer is it's a big step in the right direction, but almost undoubtedly it isn't enough. And Diane and my team and I and others in the administration are literally turning over right now. I've got no headline to give you other than our needs outpace the current funding over time. Not immediately, but over time. And again, if you're the densest state in the nation with the location that we have, which is second to none, the one thing you got to be able to do is to move people and things around. That is literally job number one, and we are committed to that. That's a train, man. These things don't come in a few cars. I think we want to cut the ribbon, Mayor. Does that sound all right to you? Shall we? Thank you, everybody.
Commissioners come up too, and we can do it right in front of the podium here.
In front of the podium, come on, man. North Bergen and Hudson for the home team. Thank you, Jonah. Great job, man. Commissioners? Great job. Congratulations, guys.
I'll give you that, huh?
There we go.
Get the right thing in place.
Well, this is the main train line. You know, we got down to the port. We have, mile-long trains. One of the busiest freight lines in the country.
Before the protest, make their chart. Oh yeah. I'll stand behind you, Carlos. Yeah, I know. I know.
Yeah, we got cold as we were sitting there.
do some more here. Yeah. Claire, can we just, this is, I'm County Vice President I have, and you know Larry.
Joseph Jerry. Joe was
Just out with Harold,
Yeah.
real quick. Harold's getting a big award tonight
Yes,
in New York
he is,
City.
yeah.
Yep, I did a video for him.
Yeah.
Give me 1 sec here, folks. I apologize. Sam, can I give this? I don't need a cold water, I promise you. I want to say a few words, if I can, up front and address the Justice Venero's report that came out yesterday. When this matter was first brought to my attention in October, I ordered a full investigation to determine what happened and to strengthen the system for survivors of sexual assault moving forward. Sexual misconduct in any form is intolerable, and it must be treated by this administration and frankly by every organization with the utmost gravity. The Venero report answered a lot of questions and laid out many valuable recommendations. But I also understand that not all of the answers are satisfying, and I share in the frustration of those who are looking for easy answers. One thing we can be clear about: the buck stops with me. I've taken responsibility for what happened. More importantly, I'm taking responsibility for fixing it. From day one, we have cooperated in an unprecedented way. There have been 7 full days of hearings with the legislature, including 13 witnesses and over 40 hours of fact witness testimony. I directed my team to cooperate in every possible way with Justice Venero and the legislature, because we need to ensure that this kind of breakdown can never happen again. What's most important is we're committed to ensuring that we implement the recommended policies and procedures laid out in this report. As Tammy, who is herself a victim of a sexual assault and a survivor, as she and I have said, this is an issue that cuts very close to home. This is not abstract. Our mission and the mission of my administration is to make New Jersey a better place than we found it for everyone, but especially for survivors of sexual assault. We must make our criminal justice system and the state of New Jersey better places for survivors to ensure their voices are heard when they seek justice. And with that, if you'll allow me to put this back in my pocket, I'll take a few questions. Ryan.
Governor, Senator Corrado suggested in her statement yesterday in response to the Venero report that it's time for you to testify before the committee. Is that something you would be open to doing? Do you think it's necessary?
I did not see Senator Corrado's statement, but I would reiterate, Ryan, I am incredibly proud of the cooperation that we have had with the legislative process. I mentioned 13 witnesses, 7 full days, 40 hours. I did not mention the amount of documents. I don't think we've said no to anything, to the best of my knowledge. We'll continue to cooperate as we have, as long as it is not, as I've said before, as long as it's not political, that it is survivor-centric, and that it is a whole-of-government approach. And I'll leave it there.
Governor,
David.
Governor, 2 prosecutors now have looked at Ms. Brennan's allegations and failed to file any charges. Middlesex County said that they saw no evidence that a crime had been committed. Friends of Al Alvarez are saying now that he has had his career destroyed and he has been presumed guilty as opposed to having a presumption of innocence. They say that Al Alvarez is a victim here too. Do you agree with that?
Well, I'll tell you, David, what I said when the Middlesex County prosecutor concluded, I can't, maybe about 10 days ago, their further deliberation. And I don't really have anything to add to that, which is, number one, we have to respect survivors, and it has to be better. And let me just say this, that the Venero report has a whole set of recommendations. Mamta Patel, our chief EEO officer, has, I think, on when 2 nights ago, came up with a list of stronger EEO policies. I endorse all of those. And it's my responsibility to implement them and to fix the weaknesses. I look forward also to work with the Attorney General, who has separately put forward a whole series several weeks ago of steps to make our society and law enforcement and the environment for a survivor of sexual assault stronger. So I said I don't want to divert, but I wanted to make sure I said that. So I said when the Middlesex process came to a head, and I'd be in the same place as I was 10 days ago. Number one, we have to respect survivors. Number two, we have to respect law enforcement. Period. And thirdly, we have to be better, both in government, certainly in transition, as Justice Veniero's report suggests, in government, in society. Please. Yeah, I've got nothing beyond that to say. I mean, I'm committed to getting this fixed, and I take responsibility for fixing it. Please.
Senator Weinberg said that this wasn't a system failure, that it was a people failure. Do you expect anyone in your administration or for the transition to face direct consequences as a result of the report?
You know, I'm going to defer to Justice Veniero's report, and he concluded and his team concluded that folks at every step exercised what they thought was their best judgment. They made the calls as best as they thought they could, including seeking legal counsel apparently at a number of different steps. I have no reason to believe otherwise. The key is we've got to fix this going forward. You know, among other findings, documentation was apparently lacking. He was laudatory about the vetting processes, but I think rightfully critical about the lack of or weakness in the documentation side of this. I take responsibility now for getting this fixed. And again, my notion, my driving notion from the minute I found out about this is it has to be better for our survivors of sexual assault. Please.
When do you think that you should have been told about the allegations about against Alvarez?
I don't know that I've got a moment in time, but I wish I had known sooner. And I think a lot of my colleagues have expressed that same sentiment publicly. And again, that's not to say, and Justice Veniero's report speaks to this, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. That's not to say that they weren't exercising what they thought was the right judgment at that moment in time. I have no reason to believe otherwise. But the fact of the matter is, I wish I knew sooner. My heart was broken. I got sick to my stomach. I still am when I found out about it, and I sure wish I had known sooner. Please.
I'm wondering if you think Hudson County prosecutor should face any consequences about the fact that she received the email and said that she didn't, but then admitted that she did.
I have literally no visibility into that. This all happened before I was even in office. So I apologize. I've got no visibility on that. I've got really no opinion on it. It's a law enforcement matter, and I have to defer, as usual, to the experts there. Thank you.
Governor, do you understand why a lot of people, especially on the committee, seem mystified, even exasperated, that no one could say why or who hired Mr. Alvarez?
Yeah, I do understand that, and I'm frustrated too. And I want folks to know that. And I understand that they're frustrated. And again, I am as well. And so I can't correct history. I've got to pick up the pieces and go forward, and the buck stops with me. So my responsibility is to implement the recommendations that have come out of both Justice Veniero's report, and again, I think they're all very strong and compelling. The steps that Mamta Patel is suggesting, which are really important, by the way. For instance, extending EEO policies of government into a transition. That would have made a difference. Taking into consideration and broadening, which you've probably heard me say in a number of press availabilities, expanding so that you actually can take into account whether or not something happened even before someone was a state employee. So I don't blame people's frustrations. I'm frustrated too. My job is to fix it going forward, to make sure if something awful like this happens in the future, that we have a far different result. And again, I'm the prime lens I view this through, and this is where we started, and this will continue to be where our compass is, and that is survivor-centric, survivors of sexual assault. I just want to get folks who haven't asked yet. Dustin.
and then you mentioned in his report two other controversial hires, Marcellus Jackson and Derek Green. Do you know if they were a part, their hiring was looked at, and do you feel confident that it was, in fact, a systemic review of hiring practices?
First of all, I have no visibility on whether that was the case or not. You'd have to ask Justice Venero. This was an independent process. I was just briefed on it 2 afternoons ago and saw it yesterday morning, as you all did. And secondly, I have no reason to believe this was not comprehensive. And we gave Justice Venero, as we have the legislature, unfettered access to people, to documents, and I have no reason to believe otherwise. You good?
This is a Gateway Tunnel project question.
Okay.
President Trump said that he has money set aside for the Gateway Tunnel project. Have you, Senator Menendez or Senator Booker, heard of this? And if you have, and if you vote to give him some of what he wants, would you guys hold him to giving us money for the Gateway Tunnel project?
Did this revelation about that he's got money set aside come up while we were here on the bridge this morning, or
CBS.
today? Are they reporting it this morning?
Yes.
Okay, so this is the first I'm hearing that. I continue to be optimistic that I'm frustrated, really frustrated that it's taken this long, but I'm optimistic that we'll get to the right place on Gateway, and it's desperately needed, right? So this is 20% of the United States economy depends on the Northeast Rail Link. And this county probably lives that and suffers more than any other place in the Northeast as a result. I'm encouraged to hear that. I'm not sure what he wants in return other than a stronger America, which is what I'd like to help him achieve.
Will you hold him accountable?
Well, we need the federal money. President Obama and his administration had stepped up with a commitment for half of the total Gateway funds. New Jersey, New York, and the Port Authority would come up with the other half. That's an arrangement that has been historically acceptable to all parties. I would like and implore President Trump in his administration to step in for their half of the obligation. Hold on, let me keep going on, please.
Governor, you may have heard the protesters on the bridge urging you not to support the construction of proposed power plants here in North Bergen. A number of towns in the U.S. spoke publicly about this. A number of towns in the region have come out against this. Where do you stand now on this project?
So I'm going to probably bore you with the same answer, but it happens to be, has the added virtue of being the truth. The Department of Environmental Protection goes through a series of processes that takes a long time, collects data, analyzes, weighs, assesses. They're in, I think I would call, I'm not using a poetic license here, early stages of that, and that's where it stands. We've got to make sure we understand all the facts before we make any decisions. Please. As I say, we understand all the facts. I make decisions based on the facts. We're collecting them. Please. So Alyssa's law, I signed. I'm proud to say I signed it yesterday, but I signed it with a heavy heart. Alyssa Al-Hadef grew up in Woodcliff Lake. She and her 2 little brothers and mom and dad moved to Florida 5 years ago, and she was murdered in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas massacre last February. And she's now one of 2 families that we have gotten to know through that tragedy as a result of that awful incident. Thanks to her parents, Elon and Lori, thanks to advocates, thanks to some brave legislators, Ralph Caputo and Jamel Holly were with me yesterday when I signed it. I want to give them and the other sponsors a shout out. They pushed this, and it wasn't easy. So this is a private panic button that we're committed to having in every public school in New Jersey, beginning with the coming school year, that has a direct line to law enforcement. I'm praying and hoping every day and night that those panic buttons never have to get used. But in the god-awful circumstance where they do have to get used, God willing, they prospectively could save a life. And it is in Alyssa's memory, so God rest her soul. We just make sure we got one here. I'll come back to you guys, I promise. Yes?
Going off of Alyssa's law, when is that rollout of the panic buttons going to start? And you signed the bill on the same day that a teenager walked into a Jersey City school with a gun, which not only as governor, but as a parent, must be concerning for you.
It is concerning. School safety is at or near the top of the list of things that I worry about every single day and work with law enforcement and communities and our Department of Education and local boards of education. So that did not go unnoticed. How it actually, the timing of the rollout, I don't know, but the law requires that they are installed in September of this year. If there's a different answer, then I'm looking at my team. If they find out that there's a different answer to that, we'll come back to you. Okay, so Ryan, David, Dustin, please.
Katie Brennan says her main issue at this point, if she feels it hasn't been addressed, is confidentiality rules. She says have been weaponized against her and that they were used as a reason not to tell you, not to confront Mr. Alvarez, not to do more about this. Do you agree with her? Do you support changing those confidentiality rules?
So first of all, I have to respect Katie's opinion, and obviously she's lived through this horror, and she's certainly entitled to her opinion. When I look at Mamta Patel's recommendations, these are game changers. These would have materially changed the reality for Katie if we were to live through this awful circumstance again. Extending EEO policies and parameters into a transition, that would have made a difference. Taking into account, as you've heard me say before, the fact that folks weren't government employees or this alleged incident didn't happen on government ground, that's a game changer. That's now going to be able to be taken into consideration. So confidentiality, to me, I still think, for folks who come forward who want what they, with an incident, and they want that to remain confidential, I still believe plays a valuable role. I would point to, as I mentioned, the extension of the EEO parameters, as well as considering non-state, pre-non-state employment. Those are big deals, and those would materially have changed the outcome here. David.
Governor, two parts, if you'll indulge me. Number one,
This will be the first time.
is there anything that you would have, if you had found out sooner about Ms. Brennan's allegations, what would you have done differently? And B, are there policy recommendations or legislation that you might recommend beyond what was contained in the Venero report?
So, David, I'm sure there may be many answers to that first question, but I said this in October. I was asked if hiring Al was a mistake, and I would repeat that today. I don't see the circumstance that if we were to live this again and I knew what happened, again, everyone exercising their best judgment. Peter Venero didn't call that into question, and I'm not calling that question. That wouldn't have happened. If he had been hired, he would have left government a lot sooner. Are there other recommendations? I know at least those two things would have been different. And again, it's the buck stops with me. My responsibility is to make that a reality going forward if something awful like this happens again. So this was one of Peter Venero's recommendations. So I'm answering the question, but I'm going to include one of the recommendations because you haven't asked about it. But I thought he made, and I think he, based on everything I know, he did a very thorough, fair, including some tough stuff coming our way in his report. But one of them is 70 days is awfully short, and that he recommended, I think he said, but I'll say it, looking to the federal transition model, which is a lot longer runway. The funding for the transition is very small. So I think I'd support, and I'd want to talk to the legislative leadership and work with them, extending the period meaningfully, and probably with that increasing the funding. Dustin.
So going back to October, Derek Green again. When I asked you about whether you knew about his past, you said it was new, which is understandable. You hadn't really known about it, and you essentially deferred to the investigation that you ordered to take care of that. We don't know if that was. But have you since learned about the jet gate issue, and how do you feel? Do you still feel comfortable about the hiring?
So I haven't been asked about Derek Lilly, I think, since you asked me about it in October. So I haven't really thought about this at all. I know notionally about something to do with Derek, but I think it may be from reading what you wrote. So I can't, just to prove that I read what you write, I can't recall I've had any, this just hasn't come up since then. So I don't have any more to add to that. Please.
So I also have a two-part question.
Okay.
Easier than the second part.
Okay.
Do you want staff members, senior staff members, to tell you the unvarnished truth or give you plausible deniability? And if the answer is you want the unvarnished truth, why has no one faced any repercussions for not telling you the unvarnished truth about the allegations against Al Howard?
What's the second question?
That's the second.
Okay. You clearly want the unvarnished truth, but the Justice Venero's report, nowhere does it say that people didn't exercise what they thought was their best judgment, that they were adhering to, as I've said, inside of the government, never mind transition. There's no evidence that he has found, or I have no reason to believe that folks didn't adhere to whatever obligations they felt they had. That doesn't mean that if you had a do-over, if you could put the toothpaste back in the tube and you do this over again, I would have liked to have known. And I think they've said publicly, in several cases, they wish they had also come forward. So my responsibility going forward is to make sure if we go through this horror again, and please God, I hope we don't, that there's not another survivor out there that has to go through what Katie's gone through, that we get this right next time. Please.
Do you find it plausible that no
By the way, I'd stay probably longer, but my hands are about to fall off, so I apologize for that.
Do you find it plausible that no one on your staff knows who hired Alvarez?
I mean, you know everything I know, and I literally mean that. I started out, I think one of you asked the question that folks were frustrated that they don't have that answer, and I said, I'm frustrated too. But I also want to add to that, you've got everything that I've got. So my job is to, going forward, to make sure that we don't see that movie again in the awful circumstance that there's a survivor going through what Katie went through, including documentation. You know, again, I'll repeat what I said. Justice Venero's report, if you read it, is fairly complimentary about the level of vetting relative to a normal transition process, but wanting in documentation and record keeping. I think that's a very fair criticism. My responsibility is to fix that going forward, again, through the constant lens that is survivor-centric. I appreciate your putting up with the cold out here, folks. And